Hi guys, am I clearly audible and visible? Dhwani, Kusha, Pavandeep, Sharanya. That's an interesting name. I hope I got the pronunciation correct. Vansh, long time Shreya, haven't been attending the classes. Vrinda and Pratishtha, will it be possible for you to switch on your camera, please? Hi Anjani, how are you? So guys, Rishabh is also joining. Pratishtha is here. Hi, welcome Pratishtha. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, yeah, I can. I was having some trouble doing that a while
No,
ago.
that's absolutely fine. Hi, welcome.
Hello, ma'am. Hi,
I just
guys.
So we'll just wait for like a minute for Rishabh to join. And till then, all my students, good to see you guys. Well, so again, I think you attend my classes regularly, and I like keeping the session super interactive. Plus, you have two very super interactive NLS students, your dream college. So these guys are going to be your seniors next year. I hope all of you make it to NLS and send pictures to me with them. So we'll keep the session super interactive, ask as many questions as possible, and we're doing it like exactly like a month before NLSAT because we've been doing a lot of classes and there are a set of recurring questions. So we'll have all of that resolved. Pratisha, you're taking the session from NLS itself.
Yeah, I'm in the hostel right now.
Yeah, that's also like an aspiration for each one of them attending the session that next year you're going to be there. So just make the most of this session. I think Rishabh is also here. Hi, Rishabh.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, ma'am.
Is
Thank you
that your
very much.
hostel room?
No, ma'am. Actually, I've just returned home for the weekend.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I would have been like super envious had that been your hostel room. So welcome, Rishabh. And okay, hi, Soham. So quickly, guys, I'll quickly set the foundation of the session for each one of you attending the session. And so Vansh is saying I saw Rishabh on reel. Yes, Rishabh is sort of a superstar. So you'll continue to see him. Watch his yesterday's session also at like a very super informative session that we did on how to structure the last 30 days before NLSAT. So very organic, fun, interactive, and informative session. It's on the 3 or LLB YouTube channel. So without further ado, thank you, Rishabh. Thank you, Pratishtha, for accepting the invite and for taking this masterclass with me. For all participants, I'll quickly set the foundation for you. So we'll talk about how to structure your preparation for part B, the significance of part B, the next how to optimize the next 25, 28 days from here, and how not to overemphasize on part B and strike a balance alongside part A, and how to actually have like a different mindset and approach for case studies for analytical essay, key takeaways, and whether or not to use IRAC, highlight components, and all basic doubts whether or not to underline. So we'll have it all covered in this session. Sounds good? Quickly in the chat box, guys. Yes, no, maybe. Okay, but before we begin, Rishabh, Pratishtha, if it's like a couple of seconds, both of you can just introduce yourself and then we'll start off with it.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you very much. I'll start. Hello, everyone. I'm Rishabh Rajmaiti again. I gave the NLSAT last year. I had all India rank of 37. And yeah, I had initially attempted the NLSAT in my third year of college in 2024. And then I didn't make it. I got an all India rank of 321. Then I decided to give it a full comprehensive year because I decided I wanted to do law. I spent a year preparing for the examination. And in the end, I also uh, took some coaching from LegalEdge, which really helped me in my preparation, especially in the last few days. And yeah, this was right around the time when I was giving the examination, just as you are. So glad to be here, glad to be of help. And I'm sure I'll try my best to resolve any queries you have in this session.
Thanks, Rishabh. Pratishtha?
Hi everyone, my name is Pratishtha and I'm currently a first year student at NLS. I'm actually Rishabh's batchmate and I sat for NLSAT in 2025. That is also the year I graduated from college and I know what stress you guys must be going through currently. I have been in your shoes, so I would suggest that you guys make the most of this session and ask us any questions or any doubts that you guys have without any hesitation because we've been there and we understand your anxiety and we understand your fears and we're here to help you as much as we can. So, looking forward to having a great interaction with you guys.
Thank you both. Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you, Pratishtha. So we'll start off with a very basic question. So I think all attending the session could broadly classify themselves into two categories. They have some sort of comfort with part B, as in they've written case studies or analytical essays before, or some have just started off, they're still trying to build that comfort. So regardless of where they are in terms of their preparation, how would the next 30 days look like, more so specifically in terms of their preparation for part B? We'll start with Rishabh first.
Yes. So I think we've already discussed this before in previous sessions, but really part B overall is graded on a curve, which means it's quite difficult, even as your answers get better and better, to progressively get proportionately marked better in that regard. In that very case, I think it'll be very difficult, if really possible, even to breach the 50 mark threshold in your part B answer. And similarly, the same score is reflected in our batch as well. So I would say primarily, if your part B is weak, of course you have to work on it, but make sure that your part A is primarily the qualifier that you're like working on. And if your part A is also weak, your part B is not going to be checked if you don't make the 75th% threshold. Like again, if your part A is weak, focus on that first. Refer to previous sessions. Now moving on, assuming that you have at least that you're working on your part A, you're prioritizing your part A, or your part A score is under control and you're doing well in mocks. Part B, it in and of itself is, again, it's a slightly different component other than other examinations like MHCT and CUET. I'm sure you would have understood that by now. What I really want to emphasize starting on is it's very important to understand that NLSAT just really is an examination made by NLS professors to test you on whether you have the reasoning and the analysis and the analytical skills required to basically form arguments and form logical and reasoned arguments that lead to a conclusion, which is what you're going to be doing throughout the end of law school. Hence, approach every single answer with that mindset, where that you're demonstrating that you're essentially showcasing your insights and your reasoning skills. More and more so regarding the next 30 days, you don't really have a lot of time. I would just propose a preliminary schedule could look like attempting a lot of mocks, ideally, because especially if you're weak on your GK or your GK prep is already behind, your CR prep is behind, you don't really have the time to like give an hour or two every day to part B in and of itself. So I think most of the practice you should be getting is via the mocks in and of itself, and then you can go forward with like trying to get feedback and trying to compare your answers to the model answers and trying to make sure that your answers match the model answers as much as possible to the highest degree as possible, both on terms of any arguments you might have missed or any language or wording that you might have missed out on, or like whether even like some of the issues that might have been like unnecessary for you to point out and like you could have saved time on those. Yeah, I think I'll hand over to Pratishtha.
Thank you, Rishabh. I do agree. Rishabh has comprehensively covered a lot of points. Just few things that I want to pitch in right now is, first of all, one thing that personally helped me a lot with Part B while I was preparing in the last 30 days, like the last leg of my prep, was focusing on managing my time very well and completing Part B. Because I have seen myself make this mistake and a lot of my peers make this mistake, that they spent a lot of time perfecting one single answer and then they did not have a lot of time left for their essay or the other case studies or legal reasoning answers. So I would say that first of all, you need to develop that skill to be able to manage your time well and to be able to finish at least part B, because if you spend too much time perfecting one answer, you might not be able to complete the rest of them. Apart from that, with respect to your part B, I think because NLS is a space that, and I say this to everyone who speaks to me about NLSAT. NLSAT essentially is an exam of your English proficiency, and as also Rishabh mentioned, how well you're able to make arguments and how well you're able to reason with your arguments. So, especially when you're writing your case studies or even your analytical essays for that matter, if you are making a claim, make sure you substantiate it or you reason it very well, because unsubstantiated claims actually hold no value when, and this is something that it's a trend you will see in law school as well. Unsubstantiated claim are not really of much value and effect in eyes of especially professors. So make sure that you make substantiated claims that are backed by examples. So that's why, if, for example, if you're writing an analytical essay and if you're trying to make an argument, if you pick up a contemporary real world example to back your argument up with that, that'll be quite helpful. And the same goes for case study as well, because if you're, for example, making an argument, using a claim that is already given in the factual matrix to support your argument will be beneficial.
Thanks, Rishabh. Thanks, Pratishtha. Can someone quickly just confirm if my screen's visible? Yeah, I've been just taking notes. So to summarize it all, each one of you attending the session, starting from here, start viewing your part B as compartmentalize it again into two sections. One is your case study, which is 60 marks, and one is your analytical essay, which is 15 marks. So you have the highest possibility of optimizing your marks here. Try and score the highest here, because analytical essay again test your knowledge, argument, coherence. So you can score the highest here. You're just vying for 15 marks here. Again, very important point that both Rishabh and Pratishtha highlighted, that the next 30 days, 20, 28, 27 days, solve as much mocks as possible and analyze them, because those are essentially they become the distinguishing factor, because that's where you're actually practicing, you're analyzing, and you're learning your critical knowledge gaps and the gaps in your understanding. Your case study essentially tests how well you can apply given set of law to a given factual matrix. And your analytical essay is more about your in-depth understanding of an issue, your exposure to that issue, how much you know about it, your knowledge, your argument. Second, I think time management is super important. NLSAT as a paper is very reading intensive. You have like 8 passages in part A, and then you have 5 case studies, 1 analytical essay. And the best way of being able to finish that paper in time is to practice as much as possible. So time management, I think a couple of students have actually dropped it in the chat box also. That okay. Guys, I'm clearly audible and visible, right? Yeah. A couple of students have actually dropped it in the chat box as well. So time management. So guys, it comes with practice that you have to take a mental note. Plus something that we've also discussed, if you feel that you have 150 minutes in entirety, you don't. You technically have say like 140, 135, 140 minutes, because 5 to 7 minutes are consumed in filling the bubble, OMR. The invigilator will kind of couple of times come to you for certain things, you're distracted, anything, you're reading, you're reviewing. So try and allocate time basis, say like you have like 140 minutes to finish the paper. Another very interesting point that Pratishtha highlighted, that NLSAT, the looking at reasoned arguments. So always keep in mind that assertion plus reasoning makes an argument. And this reasoning is you're using references, you're using example, you're using data to substantiate your assertion. So for instance, if I say my assertion is that Rishabh and Pratishtha are good with studies. That's an assertion. I backed it with data that both of them have made it to NLS and their respective rank holders, AIR holders. That's my reasoning, and that makes a complete argument. So reasoned arguments is what essentially NLSAT is looking for. Your case study, a reasoned argument, is when in you're picking up that fact, you're applying the law, and then you're concluding as to why this will either apply or not. And then a lot of examples, facts, and numbers. Everyone good so far? Yes, no, maybe? Come on. Okay. Now let's come to the second question, which is a lot of students, they're often confused that whether or not there is a structure that they're supposed to follow, IRAC, crack, etc. And we'll first come to case studies, and also whether or not they are supposed to highlight the components separately. As for example, if you're being presented with a case study, so should you write issue first, then rule or reasoning, application, and then conclusion, or it should be one continuous passage? So while there's no recommended structure per se, I think it'll be very interesting if both of you can tell what was your experience and the approach that both of you opted for in the examination. Pratishtha, will go with you first this time.
So, and this is also because this is my third trimester at NLS. I'm also integrating some insights that professors just give us generally at NLS with respect to answer writing. I would wholeheartedly suggest that students use the IRAC method, and one merit in using IRAC is that. Because the case study is in the form of a factual matrix, the examiner also wants to see whether you can pick out the relevant facts from that factual matrix and then form an issue around that or not. So it is also an exercise of abstraction in some sense, that they will give you all sorts of ancillary facts, something that's irrelevant, what color clothes a person was wearing, but then you need to pick out what is relevant and use that to form your issue. So I think that's why following the IRAC method also adds to and displays your ability and proficiency with respect to filtering out what is relevant and what is irrelevant. And Kajal ma'am, as for whether students should title their issue, rule, analysis and conclusion separately, I would say that it is not necessary. If you feel that it gives you structure, if it allows you to write better, cleaner, more structured answers, you may go ahead. But again, I would personally recommend, and this is something I follow. I think this depends on everyone's comfortable, how comfortable they feel with answer writing. I personally just use it in a sentence. So, for example, if I'm writing my issue, I would just go ahead and write that the main issue with respect to this situation is so and so XYZ. I don't write issue and then write the issue directly. So I just integrate it in a sentence because I find that it flows much better. And because there is just logical coherence, and otherwise there's breakup in the answer. I feel like it should flow logically and more coherently as a paragraph, and it reads easily. Ma'am, should I speak about the analytical essay as well, or should we move to Rishabh first?
No, we'll move to analytical essays later. Rishabh's perspective for this, and then we'll move.
Yes, so I think more or less Pratisha covered the grounds. The thing is, you should follow IRAC, but following IRAC doesn't necessarily mean that you're like married to the concept of going through that structure, especially when like it doesn't necessarily require so. I've already talked about in a previous session, I've talked about often you would be given the issue in the prompt itself, whether XYZ is liable for defamation, whether this X's claim or suit should succeed. In that case, the issue is downright presented to you. There is no value in just replicating the issue or the rule in and of itself. Try to just, in those questions, of course, the rule is valid. Try to go ahead and move forward quickly because time is of the essence, right? So try extract the operative elements of whatever the rule or the principle that you're going to be testing the problem against is, and like restate them in your own words. So then again, that's just like a more logical adaptation of the IRAC itself, because it doesn't necessarily mean stating the issue everywhere or stating the rule everywhere, right? Secondly, if you notice the structure of NLSAT questions, because the way the questions are designed, it'll always be a case that you can take either scenario or take either side and support either stance. In those cases, and just there are some very rare cases in which you'll be asked to act as an advocate for some individual, but other than that, in most cases, you can take someone's a particular stance. Because of this design structure, the fact scenarios are usually designed in a way that there would be about one or two facts that are supporting your stance, one or two facts that are kind of ambiguous, and there you have to really apply your reasoning and application to claim why those facts necessarily apply to your stance, and one of those other few sides that would go ahead and oppose your stance and would be a very intuitive opposition to your stance. It's very important that in your application you address this conflict, right? And you don't just like when you're just focusing on the IRAC, uh, you're focusing on the application, you don't just necessarily cover principles on your side, but you take the strongest argument and you don't just like strawman the opposition's argument. Strawmanning means taking a weak case of theirs or pretending that their case doesn't exist. You take the strongest argument, whatever facts might apply to the opposition side, and then go ahead and like counter it or show how you can either mitigate it by saying that, hey, my arguments or the reasoning I've given is stronger, or you can completely refute it by saying that this argumentation is not valid, or it does not apply to this case. This is important because when like they're testing of how you come to like how you apply these fact scenarios and come to a reasoned conclusion, it means considering all the fact scenarios and facts available in all the possible stances, what is the most likely and most plausible solution that comes to your mind, which means you automatically have covered the other side and like the counterfactual. Lastly, and this is something that I've just like I've noticed in a few NLSAT answers and few peers of mine as well. Be certain not to be too generic regarding your application, such as the hotel should have done more to protect Sandeep. It had a duty, it failed that duty, therefore it is liable. That's a bunch of that's a bunch of assertions. Even if you've stated that, hey, you've established why XYZ has certain duty, go to more nuance, go to the consequences, go to the implications, that in such scenario, if institutions like these are allowed to breach their duty, it would lead to such and such consequences for all the stakeholders involved. Do a stakeholder analysis, see whether it's good for public policy, whether it sets a good precedent or a bad precedent, and then therefore the court should hold parties XYZ liable. Make sure that your application of the rule to the conclusion that you're essentially aiming at on the conviction is not too generic, and it's like a bit more nuanced. You're thinking about every party that's involved, the stakeholders that's going to be involved. And lastly, just make sure not to like the answers really almost always require you to take a side. So you can always like, even if you're convicting someone, you can say that, hey, maybe the conviction should be temporary, or the suspension should be limited, or you can always argue for a more lenient punishment, but make sure to choose a side and not recuse yourself from the burden that the question is necessarily giving to you. I think those are just some of the general tips that I've noticed students necessarily fault on. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you, Pratishtha. I think that was pretty elaborative. And just to summarize it for everyone, so all attending the session, I think let's start with the primary fundamental, that there is no right or a wrong answer. It eventually, of course, you're not supposed to recuse yourself from taking a side, but whichever side that you decide to argue the case from, make sure that you're building a super convincing case. And a super convincing case is one that addresses counter arguments and gives rebuttals, which sufficiently debases the case of the other side. So that essentially what distinguishes a good answer and from an ordinary ones. So take a stand, defend it, and at the same time demolish the other side as well. Then logical coherence. Interesting point that Pratishtha mentioned, that as in a case study, they're also testing that you do not really have to rebut every single thing. That if the fact says that the other party was wearing a shirt of pink color, you do not go and argue that, oh, the color was not visible. You pick up relevant facts, material facts. That's a more technical term. Once you'll actually start with law, you'll realize, you'll learn. But relevant facts, material facts, avoid ancillary facts, logical coherence. For all who struggle with that, whether or not they're supposed to highlight the components, which is like a issue, reasoning, application, conclusion, that's a very contextual thing that you can do. While every time it won't be possible, as long as the issue is clearly mentioned, there is no point regurgitating it. You can highlight the issue in instances wherein the problem asked is different and the issue that you're supposed to answer is different. And I will exemplify it for you. If you have a question that whether A is guilty or B is guilty, you have the issue per se given. However, if the given factual matrix talks about that so and so party, the act either constitutes nuisance or not. And then the question is that whether or not this party will be granted injunction. In this particular question or factual matrix, the question asked is whether or not injunction would be granted, and the legal principle or the issue which is to be answered is whether or not the act constitutes nuisance. In instances, you can choose to highlight issue. However, one continuous passage with relevant paragraphs breaks serves the purpose. And then towards the end, you can just highlight application and conclude with that in conclusion, A would be guilty, or in conclusion, the person would be granted injunction. And again, very interesting point that both of them addressed with respect to rule, which is that avoid stating the same thing again and again, because A, you're constrained by space, so you would want to utilize that given space to its optimum. If you're just regurgitating what's already given, you're wasting that space of yours. So rule should be A, you're either writing something over and above which is given in the case study, or then you just show the application part of it. Again, avoid generic statement and stakeholder analysis. Well, that's assessing the outcome of something from different perspectives. I think we'll discuss it more in detail because it assumes a lot of importance in an analytical essay when you're actually answering it from different perspectives. So how does it impact different stakeholders? So before we move on to analytical essay, I think we've pretty much covered all questions also that were dropped in the chat box. Before we move on to analytical essay, roughly what should be the time for a case study? How much time should be allocated for a case study? Anyone? Rishabh, Pratishtha?
Ma'am, I think it depends from person to person. For me, I've tried to finish my part A in 60 minutes and then saved about 80 to 90 minutes for my part B. Again, I remember that like I was giving around anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes per question. Really depended on the question itself. Some of the questions were quite intuitive to me because they like I had practiced a lot of like questions on operative like vicarious responsibility, cost chain causation, and so on. So I was able to finish them in 6 to 8 minutes. A few other questions required a bit longer time. I had set a maximum limit of 12 minutes for a question for myself, and I also like I think that for me, because I feel like my writing speed is a bit faster and time management hence in that regards was not really a problem for me. I was comfortable with anywhere from 15 to around 18 or 20 minutes at maximum for my analytical essay. I didn't want to give it anything more than around, ideally speaking, 16 to 18 minutes.
Pratishtha?
Yeah, I took a bit longer because I'm slightly slow at math. I'm so sorry about that. But for me, one of the biggest issues I faced was especially with Part D, was that I was not used to writing by hand, because during my undergrad, I went to Ashoka University and most of our assessments were typed out. So I had really no practice of writing anything by hand. So first of all, I had to get into the habit of writing, and I knew for a fact that I was going to take slightly longer. So that's why I had divided my time accordingly with part A and part B. But when dividing time, also I would say that largely, first of all, gauge how your prep has been and what patterns you have had so far with respect to your mocks, because they will give you a good idea as to where you're lacking, and then you can supplement that in a better manner. And I agree with Rishabh, and maybe I took somewhere around I would say again 18 minutes, 15 to 18 minutes per answer. Again, these are also very contextual, because there will be some fact scenarios that will be more dense and will require you a longer time to read and comprehend. And then some are going to be extremely straightforward. And with respect to, I think just uh, breaking down your time, also save some time at the end, maybe another 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so that you can quickly flip through your answer sheet and see if you've missed out on anything, or if there's something you want to highlight, or something you want to add, or something you want to go back to and write about. So I think more or less Rishabh has covered all of those points. This is all I wanted to add.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Just summarizing, guys, again, something that all of you've been told multiple times and reiterating that ideal time, 60 minutes should be a hard stop. Nothing more than 60 minutes for part A. If you're doing it any more than 60 minutes, you're jeopardizing your chances of making it to NLS. More so specifically, condition your brain and train in a manner that get into a habit of giving part A and part B together. A lot of you are into a habit of doing part A in isolation and submitting part B answers separately. That gives you a very false and incorrect assessment of time management. So attempt both the parts together. 60 minutes should be a hard stop. And even if in instances wherein part A is easier and you're finishing off, say, like part A in 50 minutes, you should still condition your mind to finish case study, top a particular case study in 8 to 12 minutes. Because if you give yourself the leniency wherein you're taking more time for that, just in case on the day of the examination, part A is tough and you end up taking much more time in part A and your brain is conditioned to give, say, like 15 to 16 minutes to a case study, you will not be able to complete your paper in time. So these are very little hacks. These are mindset shifts. These are mindset conditioning, which is extremely, extremely important for NLSAT. On that note, let's quickly move to the much dreaded analytical essay. I think since it demands so much of understanding, knowledge, um, and you to be thoroughly read, how did your preparation strategy look like, both of you, more so specifically for analytical essay? And I'm a little unsure. I think NLSAT does not discloses case study wise and analytical essay wise marks, does it? No, right? Yeah. So let's continue with your preparation strategy for analytical essay.
Ma'am, so interestingly, when I was preparing, the NLSAT and NLS as a whole has not like disclosed any particular marking rubric. But interestingly, in the first iteration, that was 2022 sample question papers, it released a marking rubric, just like broad criteria that the analytical essay would be assessed on. That was a breadth of knowledge and like integration of a lot of contemporary public debate. So, like, again, that means I necessarily know that I have to involve some contemporary issue that I've read on in the newspaper, or even like create, like, my worst case scenario was that if I didn't know anything about the issue, which is still a bit difficult because then you always have a choice of choosing the topic that you're well versed on. I had in my mind that I would still create a public discourse and like say that this can be a pressing issue in modern times because of these reasons. So it's very important that you show that you're well versed, because it's kind of, the analytical essay is kind of like also a test of your current affairs and like just your contemporary reasoning, that you're well versed. The second criteria they talked about was willingness to engage with different points of view and display independent judgment. So it's not necessarily that you're just stating that, oh, because an article or because a recent study in Sweden says that, or because an article or a magazine or a famous personality recently quoted that, you are claiming it as like the sole reason for your argumentation. It's to show that you're using your sources and you're well versed with a diverse range of sources, but you're exercising your independent judgment and you're like basically taking whatever like whatever value you can get from the source and applying your own reasoning to it, that this and this and this is valuable in today's age, especially because in the additional context of XYZ and so on. Thirdly, it was the ability to create well supported and arguments leading to clear conclusions. So this just means argumentation structure, that is, either you're following and the analytical essay, you can be a bit more broader regards to, or a bit more loose regarding your structure, but you should still maintain coherence, that either you're going with like the first half of your essay is just building and building and building and information and contextualization, and the rest half is just leading to multiple arguments, or you can follow an context, argument, conclusion, then next context, argument, next conclusion, and for all the different arguments you have. So you can either go by different arguments or you can structure it as a whole, but make sure that you are essentially making conclusions and not just discussing. A lot of people in their essays, they just say, yeah, these are the valid points of view from X side, these are the valid points of view from Z side, and the goal is to the goal is to aim for a balanced perspective. That's not your application. That's not your like that. You show no reasoning in that. You have to take a stance. You have to involve yourself in the debate and show why one side is better than the other, or even if it's a balanced perspective, how can that be achieved and why that's so necessary. Lastly, the fourth criteria they talked about was creative responses to difficult and unresolved problems. So especially in the topics, like a lot of topics could be about, like, say, gender rights or the use of artificial, like, the topics usually present to you a conflict or an ethical dilemma, right? Gender rights, the use of AI, global warfare, international human rights, and so on. Make sure that you try to tackle the strongest problem, even if you don't necessarily have the best reasons for it. Identifying that, hey, this is the core issue, this is the core conflict, that they are like not only pros and cons of using AI, but what essentially does the use of AI mean for the future of humanity, and why is everyone so scared about it? What is the apprehension to it, and so on. Like you tackling or trying to tackle those unresolved and difficult problems in and of itself is quite viewed favorably in the analytical essay and shows that you have engaged and like had a nice stakeholder argumentation. Pratishtha, if you'd like to continue.
No, I mean, I feel Rishabh has comprehensively covered a lot of points that I was trying to make. But I think I just want to pitch in few again, my insight from personal examples. I think I remember I wrote the essay about something to do with social media and body image issues, and I really couldn't, because in the exam hall you are under a lot of pressure. So no matter how much you read and go into the exam hall, there might be a chance that you can't recall something off the top of your head. So I picked up something as simple as, I just recall that Bella Hadid had gotten a nose job when she was 14 due to social pressure. So picking even tiny examples or random trinkets of information that you have from outside, quote unquote, conventional forms of knowledge is also very important, because ultimately NLSAT, again, as Rishabh has mentioned, and I would like to reiterate, is looking for reasoned argumentation. So any example that you can use to strengthen your argument and support it any further is going to be helpful for you. And because my topic was relating to body image issues and social media, what better to refer to than someone who's a popular celebrity and has gone through something like that. Apart from that, while also I would like to talk about the structure bit as well. Personally, I find that you start with an introduction. You start sort of set a stage for your essay, contextualize it a little bit, and then move on to, I prefer that maybe keep one central argument and maybe one ancillary argument, because given that you have a paucity of time and a paucity of words and a paucity of efforts as well, because you are going to be tired after writing an entire set of doing your party and then your case studies as well. So you want to sort of streamline your cognitive load as well. Don't spread yourself too thin and try to make multiple arguments in one go. Keep one central argument or maybe two central arguments, and then hammer those. Absolutely focus on them, and then try to argue why your arguments are the correct ones. And also, I feel like but when you're trying to engage with nuance and engage with other standpoints, you can also try to say that while this is true, there is a reason X, Y, my point also stands true, because it shows that you have an ability to form an argument on, and you're not completely dismissing, but you're also considering the merits of the argument that might be proposed by your opponents in a stance like that. So again, don't spread yourself too thin. Focus on limited arguments, but making quality arguments. Apart from that, while I was prepping for part B, one thing that is very helpful to try to sort of recall or keep at least a collection of what has been happening in the news and what are the general trends and current affairs. If, for example, if you're reading Daily National, for example, I read the Hindu. So if you're reading a Daily National, maybe you can look at the op-eds or whatever the headlines are, and then make a Google document or somehow keep note of what has been in the trend and in the news. So you can like make different categories and buckets. For example, women, child, gender related issues, politics related issues, caste class related issues, international politics. Pop media, pop culture and media. And also again, another trend that I've seen is that NLSAT is quite a fan of pop culture related stuff, because when the year I wrote the essay, we had an excerpt in part A, sorry, from Kanan Gill, who is a stand-up comic, his book. So again, no knowledge is out of bounds and no topic is sort of out of reach for NLSAT. So I think a widespread general awareness is quite important. So once you start making these buckets, and if you find something interesting or something that you like reading about, and put those in these buckets and write it down somewhere, I think before going to the exam, if you even take like a cursory glance at this list that you've made, you will have something in your head to sort of refer to when you're going into part B. So even if you can't immediately recall maybe a study or some paper you had read, at least you will have some broad points that, or broad themes that you can refer to while you're writing your analytical essay. So yeah, that's pretty much it from my end.
Thanks, guys. I think very super comprehensive and informative. Somebody in the chat box, uh, uh, Ishan has expressed his gratitude, saying that thank you for such an illuminating session. It indeed is. I think equally informative for me as well to get the student perspective. I will just summarize it all for all participants. So, at the outset, analytical essay tests your knowledge, your arguments, and your structure. And your knowledge is not just superficial, but in-depth understanding of something. So I'll put it for each one of you attending the session in an example. So there are book readers and there are preface readers, which is to say that there are people at the dinner table, they'll talk about things, they just read the preface of something, but they'll try and come across like super smart. And then there are people who've actually read the book in entirety. NLSAT is looking for book readers. Do not just superficially read issues, try and understand the socio-political impact, the financial impact, stakeholder analysis is the term that Rishabh had used, that anything, be it the transgender bill, the amendment proposed, be it any Supreme Court judgment, whether or not menstrual period leaves should be given, menstrual hygiene be elevated to the stature of a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. So try and understand the logic, principle behind it. Try and understand multiple perspectives, analyze the same from multiple perspectives. Don't just read an issue and leave it there. Try and understand the background and what led to it to wherever it is today. And this kind of holistic understanding is what will actually help you write nuanced arguments. And as Pratishtha said, quality over quantity. So it's okay if you're making a couple of quality arguments. You do not have to go ahead and throw in 10 arguments, but quality arguments. Well supported arguments. Independent judgment is that in your essay, try and show as to project the extent to which you've understood the issue. So it's making an informed opinion, it's making an informed choice, it's making an informed decision, that you have gone through both the sides, the multiple facets of aspects of something, and then you have reached on to a conclusion. Well supported arguments. Roughly for structure, you can introduction, which sends the premise for what eventually the evaluator will find in your essay, then your body, which is your arguments and counter arguments, and then conclude. And then, depending upon what has been asked, so when we come to creative responses, depends upon what has actually been asked. Always have like a very solution oriented approach. So if it talks about the usage of AI and the ethical and legal dilemmas that it gives rise to, try and address it, engage with the issue head on, and suggest what can be done. So there are two broad scenarios that you can opt for. You're either dismissing the use of anything, or you're trying to come up with a more balanced opinion as to how we can continue with it, but with XYZ caveats. When at social media, boon or a bane. So it's not that you can completely disregard the merits of social media. However, there are demerits too. So how exactly do you balance it? Engage with the issue, quality over quantity. And then very interesting point that Pratishtha highlighted, that something that we've discussed in our classes is that try and make handy notes. Whatever issue that's been in news, these are recurring themes. Try and make buckets of information for yourself wherein you're highlighting important facts, references, examples. For instance, the ongoing Iran Israel America conflict, just talk about the year in which the Non Proliferation Treaty was signed, the IEA, the reasoning, the intention, agenda, purpose behind all of this, or any issue for that matter. Just those key facts, key data, take note of it so that right before the examination, you have something very handy to refer to, and a cursory glance helps you just take note of all those important things. And in terms of time, 16 to 18 minutes is a good enough time to write an analytical essay. You just need to practice as much as you can and read as much as you can. Somebody's mentioning about passive euthanasia. Again, a lot of background, contextual understanding of everything and viewing and understanding it from different perspectives. Okay. Very informative, guys. Brings me to the. So I will just quickly highlight a couple of things and then we'll come to the last question, which is more like any suggestion steps for all will be appearing for NLSAT this year. Guys, save some time so that you can always go back and highlight important things in your answer in analytical essay and case studies. But again, take note. You do not have to underline everything, otherwise it'll defeat the purpose. I think all of you must have seen that meme while doom scrolling, wherein technically you've highlighted the entire book. That should not be the case. Just super relevant things, arguments which are like the make or break, and just underline. So always have like a couple of minutes so that you can highlight those arguments, you can highlight those sentences. Handwriting, it's an offline paper. Nobody expects you to write cursive, but the handwriting should be legible. Paragraph spacing should be proper, line spacing should be proper. Take note of these 2 pointers. Guys, anything in addition to it that in addition to what I've highlighted, these 2 pointers, and anything else in this context?
I would just say overall, try to make sure that you're thinking about the issue and not and the structure comes to you naturally, and you just overall show your engagement with the issue. Make sure that your conclusion is different from your introduction. It's not just a reiteration of whatever your outline is. And yeah, I think Pratishta's now that I think I did the same, that I kept handy buckets of topics. And I'm sure that I've seen YouTube sessions of the most important topics for NLSAT Part B and analytical essays. So at least go through some of the contemporary topics, because a lot of the arguments you can use for some topics are also usable in other topics of similar domains. Make sure time management, make sure to finish the paper again. That is the number one priority. And even if you necessarily have to shorten your answer, if you think you're running low, make sure to shorten your answers and get through all the answers in the essay rather than just try to focus on one thing a bit too much.
I just wanted to quickly add that, especially because, again, NLSAT is an exam that requires, to a large extent, both depth and breadth of knowledge. Don't limit yourself just to a squarely academic space. I think one resource, and this is free, I think, is Aeon Essays. I think you can go up to Aeon Essays, and there's a wide variety of things you can find there. Nowadays, I think Substack is really picking up, and these are sources of knowledge that are not quite conventional, but are definitely going to be useful because they will provide you with a breadth of knowledge about a variety of things which you might not have any previous awareness about. Like, for example, I came from a squarely humanities background, and I did not have a lot of knowledge about, say, things related to economics, or for that matter, things relating to more technical stuff like STEM. So reading these essays and Substacks and opinion pieces online really helped. Apart from that, also for the essay, I think one important thing is, and I think this comes with practice, is because your logical structure and the flow of your essay should come more intuitively. And I think Rishabh also brushed upon this. I think that will only come with practice. So practice writing as much as you can, and give as many mocks as you can, especially timed mocks that are all comprehensive in nature, so that you know how to structure your time, and where you know that I might need some more time for my essay, so maybe I should keep it aside. And apart from that, just make sure that your essay reads and flows well, because if it's structured, or if it is not making coherence or logical sense at any point, it will sort of ruin the reading experience for the examiner as well. That is just one thing I wanted to add.
Thanks, Rishabh. Thanks, Pratishtha. Again, Eon is one of my go-to sites. I think the quality of essays, abstract ideas is top-notch. So you're actually intellectually challenging yourself to comprehend, and you're exposing yourself to a lot of new ideas, intellectually stimulating ideas. So diverse genre reading is something that is really, really non-negotiable for a competitive exam like NLSAT. So all students, again, very interesting. Do not restrict yourself just to an academic space. Broaden that horizon. Expose yourself to different genres of reading, interesting ideas, and that is something that will help you actually improve your overall approach towards the examination. On that note, thank you, Rishabh and Pratishtha. It was indeed an amazing, informative, and a very interactive session, I would say. We'll just for like next couple of minutes, 4 5 minutes, if like any questions for we'll have the floor open for any questions. Thanks, Amir. Insightful session. I have a question. So we've roughly tended to all questions which have been raised. One question from Vansh is how timetable and how did you manage your learning and practicing? But before you guys pick it up, guys, one more thing. I think for your part B preparation, feedback is something which is extremely important because get it reviewed if you're with, of course, Ellie. So we mentors, we review it extensively. Uh, but either ways, get it reviewed by your peers, your seniors, but get it reviewed because a lot of times you're restricted in terms of your understanding, and you continue to view it from one perspective. It's once you hand it to somebody else, the person introduces to a different perspective and the critical gaps which you're completely oblivious to. Um, so feedback is very important. So get it reviewed and have objectionable pointers to actually work upon and then proceed. I'll quickly circle back to the question. Vansh is asking timetable to manage your learning and practicing. Either of you, if you wants to address the question.
So if you're talking about NLSAT 2026, you have less than 30 days available. I would suggest prioritize giving as many mocks as possible because the mocks itself would firstly expose you to a diverse range of essays, hopefully, from different sources and different legal and academic material. Also, then apart from, and part B, like I think your practice essentially should be mocks, analyzing the mock part A as well as part B. Part B analysis would of course involve getting your answer as close to the mock as possible. Apart from that, like you can, and you ideally speaking, you should give your mock in the morning to stimulate the NLSAT actual timings as much as possible. So you give the mock in the morning, and then in the next day you analyze in the morning if you're analyzing it the next day, so that you can be alert in the morning. Secondly, if you want to like necessarily go ahead and give separate time in your timetable and your time sphere, if you only if you have time available, try to go through some general conceptual principles. Now, okay, the reason NLSAT asks you not to mention laws or statutes or legal knowledge is A, of course, they don't want to give people with know-how or unfair advantage, but also B, students rely on it too much. That is to say, if students already know that assault in and of itself is like a crime in the IPC or the BNS, instead of making a reasoned argument on why this is bad, they just say, hey, assault section this and this, the person should be jailed. So instead of that, try to go, if you can spend at least 15 to 20 minutes a day going through basic concepts of, let's say, criminal law. What is actus rea? What is mens rea? What is specific intent versus general intent? Constitutional law, fundamental rights, right? You could talk about contract law. Contract law concepts are quite well used, which is, okay, what is a valid consideration? What is a breach of contract? What then like administration or agency, what is vicarious responsibility, at what causation, what is a chain of causation, what is an intervening element in the chain of in a chain of causation. So all of these things are just, honestly, you can just take your marks that are already your practice material and you can upload it to AI and you can ask it to dissect the principled or argumentative legal elements in the question in of itself, and you can learn these things, these slight tidbits and legal principles that are going to help you really, really, really like understand the principal point without relying on legal know-how. And you should give this at max 20 minutes through the day. So apart from your mocks, don't practice extensively on part B. There's no merit to just giving the same essays again and again, at least until you receive the feedback, because only then will you be able to better your essay the next time in the next mock.
Thanks, Rishabh, for that answer. Pratishtha, something to add?
Yeah, while I can't honestly comment about having a set schedule because I was preparing for NLSAT under very peculiar circumstances. I was in the last semester of my college, so I was sort of juggling a lot of responsibilities. So I can't honestly comment about having a set schedule. I think Rishabh has addressed that very well. But one thing I would like to add is that it is very important to get feedback because a lot of times, and I find myself doing that because when you're reading your own essays or your own answers, a person can go either of two ways. Either you find it extremely well written or you find it extremely horribly written. So that your opinion and your critique of your answer is not coming from a point of third person objectivity, which is why it is quite crucial to get some feedback. Apart from that, please honestly do not overburden yourself as well. I think that is not conducive to a good preparation environment. Set aside at least 15 to 20 minutes every day to check in with yourself and just sort of de-stress and relax, because you cannot work with NLSAT or honestly survive in NLS for that matter if you do not take out time for yourself and for your own well-being. So I would just want to reiterate that.
I think something that I tell my students that if law school is not hectic, you're doing something wrong. So law school is supposed to be hectic. But on that note, thank you, Rishabh. Thanks, Pratishta. I mean, super informative session. I just add one point. So I think Dwani, Tanisha, questions. I'll take it up. I think there are a lot of questions, and we'll need a separate session just to address these Q&A. But nevertheless, I will have these questions shared with Rishabh and Pratishta, and they can send in their answers, and I will take them up in our classes. One very important thing, guys, that we've stressed a lot on, that practice, practice, practice. But please ensure that NLSAT is a pen paper based examination. So you're taking a lot of mocks offline. There's a huge difference in terms of you attempting a mock online and offline. Your reading speed varies. You struggle with writing straight sentences. You're constrained by space, and just the very feel of a paper feels different because, of course, with the advent of technology, all of us have switched to notes, AI, and we are pretty out of touch with writing or just reading things in physical format. So please take mocks offline. We are doing the All India Open Mock on 5th of April, and I hope each one of you attending the session is registered for it. If not, please do compete against like hundreds and thousands of students and feel that real competition. So do take a lot of mocks offline and analyze them. For how many mocks? You should ideally be writing 2 to 3 mocks. So you take the mock today, and Rishabh, interesting and very well highlighted that try and give the mock in the time span of 10 to 12:30 so that your brain is active. If you're a night owl and your brain activates post 12 in the second half of the day, you will struggle because you won't be able to read. So very simple hack, but you need to condition your brain into trick your brain into giving that mock in that time span so that your brain remains active. Then analyze the next day. Avoid cognitive burnout, which is why 2 to 3 mocks in a week, because you need some time to recover as well. It's an intensive reading intensive paper. You will zone out. So give yourself time. Pratishta highlighted 15-20 minutes to check in with yourself that, hey, I'm doing fine and I'll get through. So keep reminding yourself. And I think your generation is, including myself, we pretty much believe in the power of manifestation. So I hope to see you all in NLS this year. All the best. Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you, Pratishta. We'll meet again, guys. Thank you for taking out time from your busy schedules. I really understand that law school is super, super hectic, most specifically NLS because it's a trimester system. So it's like a blink of an eye and you're just prepping for exams again. So all the best, both of you. A lot of them are going to be your juniors. So thank you for being amazing seniors and for this wonderful session. See you guys soon.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank
All
you for
attending?
having us, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. If you've missed out on any questions, I apologize, and I will definitely take up these questions with them, and we'll try and have more sessions with these two to add that more student perspective. Thank you, guys. Fun session. See you soon.